So, good afternoon. This afternoon we're going to have an interactive session on large classroom pedagogies, and specifically just exploring and Annaline's favorite word, interrogating teaching strategies for us to have more engaging, impactful sessions. And we all know large classrooms have their challenges, but I think after this afternoon, with our discussions, hopefully we'll also identify some of the opportunities that we have and that we can create within our large classrooms. So there's about three aspects that will be covered. One being the South African context and how that influences our learning and teaching spaces, specifically in relation to having our large classes. And then, as I said, we're going to just go through a few strategies that are underpinned by learning theories that we can maybe introduce in our classroom situations, and I'm sure out of discussions we will realize that we are doing a lot of it already. So that, and just maybe share our experiences among each other, just to see what can work, maybe ideas that can be communicated between different disciplines. And then lastly, just a way forward, how we can strengthen our practices within large classroom situations. But anyway, this afternoon, Prof. Annalene will be guiding and facilitating our discussions. And I know we are not going to just sit back and listen. So over to you, Annalene.
Okay, afternoon colleagues. We are still waiting for a few people, but I think we're going to continue and they can just join, okay? I think out of the 13 that we said we were going to be, we're about 8 now, so there should be more. And as you can see, we don't have we're not fancy this afternoon, we don't have like an external person to speak to us, so you're going to have to endure the conversation. But it also comes back to the thing that we call it a roundtable conversation, which means that we actually wanted to have engagement with each other about our thoughts, about our concerns, etc. And yeah, what did you use? Did you use the word opportunities or did you use opportunities? Okay. And I'm a bit scared that people are not going to like that, you know, the idea that we call opportunities, especially if it's such a challenge for us. Okay. So I thought maybe to start off with is to say why this topic. Why this topic? Okay. And within our faculty, I think we have, amongst the disciplines that we have different class sizes, you know, and what even might be a large class for one group of us, another person can laugh about. But the topic came about because I was at behavioral sciences, behavioral and lifestyle sciences. It's the learning and teaching conversation that Prof. Sajid had with you. And then the topic came up, you know, psychology of everybody, I was surprised, was saying, this thing about our large classes, and then eventually we decided maybe we should have a conversation about it. And you'll see at the end of what we are doing, we cannot regard this conversation as solving our problems, okay? And it's not going to, it's also not intended to shift our thoughts to walk out and think, but I still have a problem, and people talk as if they, it's just easy to solve these issues. So we have to also at the end think about how do we use this as a catalyst to help us really work together, across our disciplines to be able to share with each other and work with each other. I do feel from the beginning of the year, for instance, when we were looking at our what was the first one that we had on assessment, innovative assessment strategies, etc. We said we were going to have another one this year, but time runs away with us, okay? And we will again for the new year, and there were others, but some gap that I feel is that we need to create some and I don't know whether that's the right word, learning communities. You know, for us, out of that, we need to create strategies as to how we can work with these things together in smaller groups outside of this, self-directed, you know, but that we then eventually kind of build a pool of things, but we'll talk about that later. So that's how it came up as a conversation, and because we have these challenges, and I think I just wanted to, I don't want to trip on anything more, and I also don't want to block anything. So the next thing that I have put up there was to say, what will we hope to gain from this discussion today? Okay? So as you came and as you decided this is what you're going to do for your Friday afternoon, I know we give nice snacks, but I'm sure that's not why you came for the afternoon. You want to have something coming out of this. And what could that be? You know, so let's just share that with each other. What would be the things that we are hoping to gain from this conversation here today?
I think, okay, obviously ideas for, I think, attending a few of these already. I know when I walk out I've got actually something solid that I can use. It's not just a, you know, we're sitting here listening to somebody and we're going to use it but probably lose it when we leave. So yeah, something that we can actually use.
Okay. So ideas and strategies would be one of those that we hope with. What else would we like to do?
I think mine is the same. I was really happy when Carmen said strategies will be shared because that's what I came for. And then also just I think most staff members have ways of dealing with it, even though we don't call it a strategy or we're not aware of it, but those informal ways that we have found, when I do this, then that happens. And I really enjoy listening to those kinds of things that people share, so also to listen out for that.
And I think that's a very important aspect, to learn from others. And it's nice that you have this forum where we meet and discuss and find out new ways of addressing. I also thought maybe there are other technological gadgets that are now used in the large classes that we can maybe implement.
Which you can share with us.
No. No, I only have one currently that I'm trying to address. And if I pull that one apart, then I'll be very happy to deal with large classes.
To deal with large classes that are small classes.
Yes.
Attendance.
Oh, yes.
So
I have a plan.
to encourage student attendance.
Yes, I have a plan.
Okay, right. We do call this interactive, right? So, I mean, I'm just here to facilitate the conversation. Anything else that we hope we can get from here? Because what we are saying, some ideas, some strategies that we share, and share those informal ways amongst each other, things that we already do. And we're not always aware, you know, and things clearly about the fact that we are doing this. So learn from each other. I think that for me is very important. And I think what we do have, and every time, you know, the longer I'm in the space, the more I become aware of it. And the strange thing is that when, as a lecturer, in my host department, you know, I do what I do interact with my different colleagues, and there are those times when you decide that you work together with colleagues from other disciplines. Or sometimes you have a thought that you want to do it, and then you get so busy that you never get there as well. You recognize that one as well, né? And Aisha, as I now engage more with the IPE committee and the activities and that has already happened, I feel less guilty about the fact that sometimes it was a thought and I never got to the actual doing, because it takes a lot to be able to do that. But it's in this space where I have just become more aware of how much we can actually mean for each other, you know, in many different ways, etc. and so on. So I like the idea of the learn from each other, and I just need to warn you, the fact that, you know, with gadgets and all of that, that we already do is what we're going to have to start sharing here as well. So these are some of that. If you have more ideas, please do and speak to that. And then I think the question that I have, that we don't necessarily now, but we can talk about it, but we also have reflective exercises that's going to help us to basically record that, is this next question. Because we always say that about our students, right? They don't come as empty vessels, they come with knowledge already that we need to know how to incorporate and help them, because it actually helps them engage as well if they feel recognized in that space. So we use the same principle here, okay? And in that question we say, what do we as participants bring to the table today based on our own experiences as academics in the classroom? And maybe I just quickly want us to think about that question, okay? So you don't have to say to me, I do this in the classroom, but the broader question of what do we bring in terms of this? Because we are not in large class pedagogies. Some of us have been in some of these sessions and very fancy training sessions as well. And others of us maybe have read up more about it, thinking about it, talk about it amongst us. So it's not necessarily that you come in here and this is not a conversation that has happened before. The very fact that you have questions about it, the fact that you decided to turn up this afternoon means that you have thoughts about it. So my question here is, what do you think do we bring as participants to the table here that will really help this conversation that we have?
Different perspectives.
Different perspectives. Okay. So we bring different perspectives. I think that's important. So I don't think we bring. Okay, never mind. That was not quickly, yes, no.
Maybe different levels, not different levels, different, I'm thinking of number of years. So sometimes when a newer person comes in, some of us might be newer than others, you tend to have a lot more, you look at, maybe you've got a bit more time.
Fresh.
You look at something with fresh eyes.
Fresh eyes, yes.
Or even if it's just, for instance, let's not talk about it, but your material that you're lecturing, it's not necessarily how long you've been here for, but is it new or old? And if we've done something 2 or 3 years in a row, it's the same old, it's difficult to go change. And we kind of get into a comfort zone, but when we get something new, when you're doing something for the first time, you've got some fresh ideas.
Okay. So this is not, when you started saying that, and this is now the kind of boxes that we put in. Immediately I'm thinking about how, the people who's longer in the space, the people that might have been in the space only for 2 or 3 years actually did learn from it, and you just flip that around and you say, because it allows people to come, think about it with new eyes, looking at it with new eyes, being something that I've done for a long time, and just reflecting, and doing that.
I want to agree with that because we've had staff members start, so we, psychology, we're the reason you're sitting here today. But we've had staff members start like in the last year and a bit, and that is really true. So those staff members that have started, fresh eyes, bright-eyed, bushy tail, come in with that type of way of thinking and what is the best way. So it's almost like the best standard in order to do the curriculum and all of that. And we're a little bit jaded as people that's been here for a while. So I can definitely see that the newness and how that injects certain things into the program, but soon met with the large classes and then really can't follow through with some of those really good ideas. But they keep us talking in staff meetings in terms of other ways of doing it, and then it's a constant conversation in psychology. So I think just to add, we work and we've always worked with large classes. So there's definitely a level of experience in terms of what you thought when the comment was first made. We do have a lot of experience with working with large classes, but I do acknowledge the fact that we can be a little bit jaded by it and just sort of do what we've always done. And perhaps, just like the comment that was made in that meeting that we sat in, interesting ways of looking at it, how other people, small ways that people have thought about teaching larger classes, because it's not necessarily the number that you see. It's also the type of work that you're trying to go through. So 20 can actually be quite a lot, depending on the material you're working with, for example. So we bring the experience, but I'm very alert to that fact. That newer people bring that new energy. Yeah.
reminded me of something. We always, you kind of make an assumption we all know each other, but I think just to contextualize where we are located as well, just a quick round, table round. This is me, and this is the department that I'm in. Okay, just to, because when you see it, by the way, I'm from psychology, I thought, okay, I did not do that part. I tend to forget that, so let's start with you. Okay?
I'm Ganesh. I'm a lecturer in psychology. Yeah, so that's me.
I'm Natalie, I'm a social development professionals.
I'm Charlotte, I'm a medical science. Nicole, I'm a pharmacy.
Hi everyone, I'm Charlene, I'm a lecturer at the medical school.
We start medical school.
Doina, pharmacy. Janet, pharmacy.
Thank you. And as you were introducing yourself, am I right if I said there's at least five of you, different disciplines already just around the table, né? And that is then what enriches the conversation that we do have. So we bring different things to the space, and I also do agree with you actually with that fact that because now I can't see myself as a new academic anymore, and especially sometimes when I find how difficult it is to come up with a bright new idea, of what I should do in the class. But it is actually our colleagues that steps into the space, looking at it with new eyes, that sees things, the same thing differently, that brings that to the table. So thanks, colleagues. So what we are saying here is that we bring here different perspectives, various levels of experiences that allows us to look at this with new eyes, and the fact that new staff often bring different and new and
I was just also wondering, maybe it's just me, but for me there's the tension that we had a session on rehumanizing pedagogy a few weeks ago, and that's the philosophy of the institution in terms of learning and teaching. But the bigger your class becomes, for me, the less feasible it is to try and implement that kind of approach in the classroom. So the tension, I think that's the biggest tension with the large class. It makes me just fall back into more of a lecturer style, which I don't want to do, but I'm stuck there most of the time.
And I'm glad you're saying that, Natalie, because I think in the next slide that I just want to, just in terms of the context, and it's not a context that we don't know, but it's just a context that we want to just put out there for ourselves again, in the space that we are.
Yeah, can I ask a question?
Yes?
This passion, do you feel it comes from wanting to humanize more pedagogy, or from not being a balance between humanizing pedagogy and humanizing the work environment?
I don't know which one of those two, but I think for me the humanizing pedagogy is a style of being in the classroom that would not be me standing in front and talking for 90 minutes. But it becomes difficult to engage the way that I understand it with the classroom when they're so big, because they just become more anonymous and one big cloud in front of me.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I see as well, because I just harken back to my own fourth year. There were 44 of us, we were a big class. And we all knew each other pretty well. And so if you wanted to have a conversation in class, you could. And you knew who was what and who were the total brainiacs and who were the, but you weren't embarrassed in front of your peers to talk. I now find it's so interesting because, I mean, a lot of the closer girls who, if you hear them in their peer groups, they are the loudest. And if you ask them a question, it's very shy, and I wonder if that's because it's in front of so many people and they themselves don't even know all their classmates.
That is I think it's a valid question to put out there and to be able to think about. I remember like 2 weeks ago, Natalie was asking me about the third year group, which I'm now giving a research module to. Now, they're about 100, and that's our biggest class. Although for us that feels like a lot. But I know when they were doing my test, I checked, and there was 190 of them that has written the test. And I'm sorry, I haven't looked at who did it, And then Natalie asked, I said, well, I actually like them. And they always, like they turn up for the class. And then she asked me the other question about how active they are. And then that, because the reality is that there's only a few people, that, and it might also be, like you said, not necessarily, it's the fact that they have to speak among so many people. Now, I always know that if I have a class just before they're going to have a test for something else or an assignment they have to hand in, then I don't have many people in my class. But actually, if I have to say it out loud, those are my nicest classes, because then in terms of engagement,
That's the people that do engage.
exactly, yeah, because then they do. So colleagues, I thought because of what you were saying, Natalie, before we're going to go up to something a little bit on our own, just thinking, I just want to talk around, the issue that we have on large classes, etc. And I think the tension that you talk about, is also a tension between access and the issues around justice, that we have. Now colleagues, we have come you, and if you haven't given it yet, you've been very, very busy. Carmen is going to give me one of these days, and then I'm also going to, okay? Because she runs around very much. I did give you, some of you might know this book, but I've given you a copy, electronic copy, that you have access to, okay? It's a 2013 book. And what I am doing here today is that the conversation here, I'll give you other literature as well, but the conversation today, and especially when we start looking at strategies and thinking, there's two sets. I've taken from two of the chapters there, just some of the ideas, that stimulate our conversation. And the thoughts here also comes from that book, for instance, that we talk about. So when we look at access, it does come from the book or the other article, I can't remember. I just realized I forgot to put the reference there, okay? So when people come through the university, what do we give? They have access to knowledge. Right? So by the fact that they can actually enroll into the university, and more students can enroll every year, it means that more people have access to university, access to knowledge, okay? Access to knowledge, supposed to be. And they also have access to, and I've specifically put there potentially, because we know we have issues with people finding jobs going forward, okay, when they are done and they graduated. But they do have potentially, the access to potentially better life opportunities. So when they do get into a job, they, it's going to be better. And stats still tells us that your graduate, although we have this high unemployment rate that we are having, and our numbers look so terrible, but your graduate is still more likely to get a job than somebody who's not, has finished matric, etc. and so on. So that would be one of the parts of the axis that becomes very difficult in the tension that we are having, okay? Okay, there, you know what, something about Friday afternoons. This is that's the article that I've taken this conversation from, okay? Because then the colleagues here also speak about the issue of massification. And I mean, that's part of the conversations going out there in terms of large class pedagogies, etc. and so on, okay? And they indicate that this concept in South Africa is linked to our historical context. For instance, and I've just used the example there, and I'm sure if all of us now had to share our own experiences of being at university, it would depend on what university we have been part of, right? I remember when I started, and okay, the difference there also was that the first year in social work was open. Okay? So many students afterwards decide they go to BA, they go to this, etc. and so on. And then it becomes smaller from the second year, very much like UP has in our program, for instance. Okay? But classes were quite big. I was at UWC, right? And classes were quite big. Right? My brother started with pharmacy. Classes were big. And so that transition from school to university is particularly difficult in big spaces like that, where you have so many students in that way, okay? So the whole issue of where we are is linked to our historical context, okay? It's also different amongst the different universities. By now, many of our universities who historically haven't had those high numbers now have high numbers, so you deal with much higher numbers. I know when I started at the Free State University, that was a historically white university. My colleagues who's teaching there has been at the university before 1994, and most of them, a lot of them were, and the examples of class size for my qualification then and where we were sitting now was very different, okay? So it really is then also different historically across those universities. And then I think the other thing is it's also different amongst our faculty, our departments, amongst the faculties, but also the departments. You know, some of our qualifications here cannot take a huge number of students. So you actually have a smaller class, and others, again, you can take a lot more, okay? But I think the tension and that social justice issue that you spoke about is exactly what they then also allude to. I know that they also make reference to Jonathan Janssen's work in that way, is to talk about the fact that the institutions, the numbers in our institutions grew much quicker than what the resource availability is, and that's why we are where we are, you know. And that's part of that big tension, is that as much as we can talk about this, that difficulty, the fact that class sizes moved along, but resources couldn't follow suit in that way, okay? We then have that challenge. So what do? So we achieve the social justice and access, but we lack the resources, you know, and our epistemological access. I have to, you know, that's a word that I always struggle with, and it took me 2 years in class of students always having to laugh at me because now I can't go, okay? And I have to warn them before the time is good. But our epistemological access is then still difficult, okay? Because of our limited resources. So it does have a negative impact, and as I was looking at this, and I thought, and that then has an influence on the kind of Mandela graduate that we want to have, you know? So it means, so the conversation links to that we are saying that we want to have, okay? So I thought what I quickly want to do, and I'm just going to give you, I need to look at my time as well. I'm sitting with this thing in my pocket.
It's on the slide.
Hey? But I'm blind. So I have to look at it here, okay? So I have to look at it here. So I wanted us quickly just to reflect. And this is now a reflection quickly on yourself, okay? Just for yourself for 2-3 minutes. And then for those of us that feel that we want to share in this space, so I said no. So I actually said reflective exercise that then allows us, it's 10 minutes. So 5 minutes of thinking about it, and then I think 5 minutes for us to share. Because we may actually, and you see what we are saying there, note down your thoughts and experiences around your class size and your ability to obtain the required depth in student learning, you know? Knowing that this is our classes. I know you guys, they also sit with your students, about 100 students, 90 something, etc. So, but that's also where you are sitting. So that mirrors a lot of our numbers here as well. And you see our experiences are different. So think about your class sizes and your ability to actually get to that level of knowledge that you think you want to get to. Okay? So just a little bit of a reflection, and then I think for us who feels comfortable, let's share here. I'm not going to put you under pressure, but I think it's going to be healthy for us to just hear each other's voices in that way. And don't worry too much about the fact that time-wise, what is on your watch and what is on the program, it looks like we're running behind, but we'll make that up in the conversation because I actually don't want to talk too much. Okay? one more minute, and then I'm going to ask us just maybe to share some of those where you feel comfortable. People are saying some of your thoughts around there, of your classrooms and the impact that it has on your for student learning from your experiences.
So I sort of reflected also just based on my time as a student, and we had many opportunities in class to build on other skills besides just critical thinking and things like that. We were tasked with sort of debating stuff. We had to write small pieces of work and things like that, and we would be able to discuss that. So taking the the content a little bit further, so that's what I came from, and that's how I was taught. And I think about me asking a question and hoping I don't put too many hands, because to actually, and then who's to say who must go next. So I find that sometimes my experience that you ask question, but you're hoping not too many people have their hands up, because then you can only allow a couple or a handful of people to answer something. Yeah, and I mean the numbers, but what I also have found, and as I was saying to Nicole, our third years tend to speak more, tend to interact more, but I'm very much aware it's because honours is coming and they need to be seen.
Okay.
So we capitalize on that as much as possible, because we do that. But I think because of our large classes and the type of learning we need to have take place, that we're not actually able to. We're really not. So we, just like Natalie said, we're able to give the information, the content, but we're not sure how much of that is actually being understood and really thought about critically, even across different theories or things like that. So I mean, to answer the question, we've got our test to go on, but you can't really see because there's no written pieces of work for undergrad. There's no real conversations happening. I do reflect on reflection too, so I'll get to that when we get to that point in terms of how we've tried to resolve some of those issues. But to answer a short answer, no, we don't actually get to where we would like to be with that. Yeah.
Okay. More other colleagues? So, and I don't know what I'm going to do. I have a class of 800 students. Right? I'm just going to become a traditional lecturer, and that's it. And I'm going to live with that.
Yeah, it's very difficult to deliver multimedia required depth in the large class, but what I noticed is when we have a free time, free space, so it's not a lecture, it's a tutorial where I do not come prepared with something as such. I'm opening the platform for them to start asking questions. Then the engagement happens, and I can see where the gaps are, what needs to happen next. Unfortunately, because of the workload, I'm not always able to conduct all the tutorial sessions, so I have other tutors conducting and I get feedback from them. The other thing that I've been doing for the last 2 or 3 years is to put self-assessments on Moodle with my feedback. And again, they need to go through it and check the feedback versus their answers and decide, is now the time to go and see the lecturer and discuss it or not. But I cannot go and check their answers. I cannot go and sit and check answers for 130 students. So I empower them to take ownership of their learning. Yeah, it's that free space outside the lecture works wonders, but when Then I realized, because I didn't study here, I realized what my lecturers were doing when I studied. After every section, we used to have tutorials. So section, tutorials, after the same academic. So it was built in the schedule. It wasn't like optional. It was mandatory to attend to the tutorials based on the section that you studied in the lecture.
It's interesting you should say that, because when I studied, psychology had tutorials, compulsory tutorials that you would need to attend, and they were given by either postgrad students or people that sort of contact people that came in and handled a particular section of work and pull that sort of thinking through. So we have had that, but we're missing it. Obviously, the budget is not there. But that is something that we've actually spoken about, that we need to find a way in which we can at least have that happen again, because that was quite valuable.
Because then you link the two.
Yes. And but even the first sort of comment about how the free space, so that's one thing that we had. Not all of the academics allow for that, but I know I have an open discussion. So it's not a lecture. It's in there. It's not mandatory, but it's a space to be able to just, crystallize certain things, ask questions, but also some of the more interesting things about what they've learned. So it's an open space, not structured, and you come in and you just have a big, chat about things.
It's nice because you can see actually how much were they able to grasp or not.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to take one more thought, maybe, on.
So, one of the things that I found really helped with these aren't always available. During COVID, had to figure out how to do practicals, and I found a simulation online, which the students actually had an avatar and they had to go and do certain things, and what's wonderful is it self-assesses. And it gives the students an opportunity to do something that they really can do in their own time without being watched. I let them have as many opportunities as they want to do it, and within a time frame, then they get the highest mark. That they can also then get feedback from it, what they did wrong. Then I found if the more sort of tools like that, where the student can do something rather than listen. Because I put lots of videos on, but do they actually watch them? And when they are watching them, are they thinking, are they concentrating, are they, as much as it's visual, it needs to be, they need to do.
Can I add something? I know you said that was the last.
No, that's fine. I never do well with time. And I have to kind of adjust as we go along.
You can see the pharmacist overachievers.
Oh yeah, 1, 2, 3, sorry, we're taking over. So teaching a completely new topic this year, pharmaceutical chemistry, which I've never done before. Also teaching something that the pharmacy students are terrified of. Like they did not want to be chemists, they want to be pharmacists. They love pharmacy practice. They'll talk a lot about that. But when it comes to chemistry, they're not confident of their knowledge. Most of them scrape through first year chemistry. So when I've had to teach second years and go back to everything and try and cement that. So my second years, by the end of the first semester, were more comfortable to start talking to me. But the third years now, I didn't teach them last year. And they didn't have a regular lecturer actually. So these guys don't want to say anything. Even things that they should really, it's so easy. I can ask them the easiest questions and they just won't answer. So it's often based on the groups. They're scared, like you said, of a big group and of being wrong. And they don't have that base knowledge that they should. If they're confident in that, then they should be able to ask the question better.
I think the other thing.
No. These guys from the medical school, I was hoping they're going to share some of those things, We can? Okay.
I just want to say also links with the massification because they come so much from outside PE, away from their families. They look for that parent figure. And if you take them from the first year or second year and you they see you the same place third year and they grow fond of you, they trust you and they open up and they are more comfortable speaking in front of you, which is very important for them.
Yeah.
Because they don't feel they are just one soul in the big crowd. You notice them and you care about them.
Yeah, and they become more comfortable talking
Yes.
to us as well. So you see now we're heading further, but do you guys want to add anything to this? See that Natalie was very quiet, but we'll get back to that. No, I'm just making jokes with them.
I actually teach third year students clinical skills and simulation. Actually, simulation is something else I do, but we teach them clinical skills and reasoning. So you've got a theory class with 100 students on a Monday afternoon with 3 hours slot. And then you've got a practical on a Thursday, half of the class in the morning and the other half in the afternoon. Now you do your theory and students are disengaged. I mean, I sit at the back and I can see they're on the cell phones, they're on the laptops, they're studying, they're doing something else. Many of us that are teaching on new lectures and new to large groups. So that is a challenge, but the students themselves are also not coming to the party. So you can do your theory lecture and then you have to do your practical examining, taking history. And the students are not prepared. Because I ask, how many of you have prepared? And it's usually 20%. So what is the point of doing theory and bringing it to a practical session but you didn't prepare? And then your practical session becomes a teaching session, which is very tedious for the lecturer. And we have to repeat everything in the morning, we have to repeat in the afternoon. So it is an exhausting day when the students are not prepared.
And it's unfair for the ones that actually
Yes.
put the effort in,
Yeah.
because you lose their attention.
It is.
Colleagues, so can I quickly ask you permission? Because the program says we were supposed to have a body break now, okay? And I'm gonna quickly move the body break a little bit low down. Is that okay? Because you don't seem to be tired now. So let's do that. Yeah. What I'm going to do, and I'm not going to take a long time. I'm just going to address three slides here, right? And I want to say to colleagues that it is not about, if you look at this slide, there's a lot on this slide that we can identify. You know, we've done it at some stage. We do it, visual aids, etc., and so on. You know, but let's just talk about it, right? So let's talk about it, and let's talk about it in different ways that we can speak to it. Okay? So this is one of the chapters within the book that I've just showed you. So you can go and you can read these things. I was looking at it very quickly for the conversation. When I was looking at the book, I thought, okay, which ones of the chapters here will really work for you now, you know, for this conversation. But you've got the book and then, you know, different stuff will work for you at different times, okay? So what these guys obviously are arguing here, and you see this is now where the opportunity, well, let's not use it opportunity, but this is sometimes where the tension comes, because we talk about, we know it's a challenge. And then we go and we do, so people speak to us and say, okay, it might not necessarily be the large class in itself that is the issue, okay? And it doesn't mean that students' engagement will forever be lost, because the reality is we're always going to have large classes, you know? If we decide now, we cut our numbers to 40 per new entry. Some of us might already be lower than that, but most of us don't have that. First of all, we'll have the SRC on top of us. Secondly, half of us, okay, let me put it this way. You know, I was in the East Coast, so I can put it that way. Secondly, in 2 years' time, 50% of us might not have our jobs because the subsidy of the university has been tied into these things as well. So there's this constant challenge. And now we have this tension, and does that really mean that student engagement will forever be lost to us? Because it feels like that, okay? So in terms of what they then argue is that how do we look at the structure of our curriculums, you know? And all of us have our curriculums, but talking about if we have to go back and we go look at it again, and in that conversation of looking at it, we say to us, these are the size classes that we have. How do we, when we look at our activities, when we look at how we put out what we're going to do within these modules, do it with the idea that we actually want to enhance learning and engagement for our bigger classes. So I think for me that's the way that we talk. So it's a structure of the curriculum, the strategies for instruction, and the way of assessment that we then talk about. That might be the pathway. So if we think about what is it that we can work with, those might be the issues that we then can work with in terms of enhancing. And I still say it with care, because, and I'm going to repeat this again, I don't know whether somebody with an 800 first year group and somebody with 100 first year group, okay, is going to have the same kind of feeling of this can work for me. Okay, so let's just be clear in terms of it, okay? So then obviously they propose a number of things, and like I was saying here, some of these things we're familiar with. I'm not going to touch on all of those, okay? But I'm just going to touch on some of these here in the way that we think about. And if we think about personal reference, so if we become, you were talking, like we become like a parent, or a parent figure, or we're so comfortable with the students, they're also used to us, and sometimes to be able to explain something, you go and you pull an experience of your own. Like yesterday, I was doing in my third year research module, right? And we're doing literature review. I want to find a student that loves reading. Okay, I mean that's probably 5% of the students. So the whole thing with this literature review and explaining why, how it gives direction for your thinking in your research. When I talk to the fact that they have to read this academic and they have a thing. I have to now explain about, which is obviously what we deal with in terms of how does it help you. So the concept of how you become a voice of authority through the reading and the argument, argumentation and making the links, etc. and so on. And in that way, I had to share something about myself, just to make that. And I could talk to them about the fact I finished my PhD. I don't question this, but I'm not really a public speaker, okay? If I have a choice, I don't talk, okay? If I can sit, if anybody else talks and I don't have to, it's in a big space, I don't. My husband talks very easily. So when he talks, I take the advantage of sitting back and da-da-da until I feel I have to say something, okay? So now you are here, you just finished your PhD, it's your first academic conference, it's my first conference, I've never been to a conference before. I need to present my work, okay? And I'm going to be in one of the side groups now, and I'll explain that to them. And all of a sudden, 20 minutes before we need to start, my supervisor comes and said, you're going to have to present in the big group with all these industry groups and stuff. And I was totally nervous, okay? And he walks away and said, you know your work better than what they do. So I had to make that connection for them in terms of the fact that the only way that I could actually go and do it, and then were able to do it with confidence eventually after the first 2 minutes of the voice going a little bit like that, was to the fact that I became, an authority on my concept because of that. So I had to share that with them. So we have different things that we do share, and we also know how to share it in ways that is appropriate for what it needs to be linked to what the outcome, the thing that the student needs to understand it, The other concept about guest speaking.
Can I add to that? When I first started as an academic, you said that you've got lots of new staff. I was so nervous as well, but I was still older, so I look like I should know what I'm talking about. And someone said, you know a lot more than the students. So that was also in my mind when I stood up there. I know more than them, and I kept convincing myself. Also a reason why I'm teaching chemistry, because if they can do it, then I can definitely do it.
So you have to be, and you only become that because of the fact that you've engaged with the work, So having to explain that kind of thing. Now this one is not unfamiliar to us. Natalie, I would know from this thing is not an unfamiliar thing in terms of getting guest speakers. Now some of us sometimes say that when there's guest speakers, the students listen better. Other times we are a little bit distressed because they were actually guest speaker and the students looked like they were very disengaged, etc. But it also helps, and what I've seen, I don't know why I'm using Andre this afternoon for a lot, but when I was looking at that part, I thought about it. And I've seen when he's been invited as a guest speaker, by people. Because then it's the seminar, it's normally that kind of the seminar, and we'll talk about seminars a little bit later as well. It is to actually people now know what the topic is, you know. So students, because the students don't always read the things that we ask them for pre-read. But if they have a bit of accessible pre-reading, accessible meaning not too bulky, not too much, and they can create the questions that they hope you address in that session, then they're already more engaged with what they have. And then the lecture then, which that's the other treat, is then also designed around addressing those questions that students came up with. So that I found is sometimes quite usable, you know, and useful. And the other one that I just needed to add here as well, I'm going to come to student debates, is obviously our visual aids, etc. But visual aids coming up later as well, on its own don't always just help. You know, if we have YouTube videos, etc., can be a passive reading space. But if the conversation that's designed, you know, so this is, the video is there, but they need to engage with it, you know, they need to speak to it, they need to address that. It becomes a more active space that we are able to. Although many of the things that we have here, we recognize, it also allows us just to ask questions about how do we effectively use it, you know. I think students debates and student presentations is obviously something that really helps us a lot as well. And also the other one that I needed to finish off in terms of this is the short writing activities, but that is followed by a discussion. Whether that's the group discussion, so they all sit and they do a little writing, you know, they do a short writing activity, and depending on the size that we have, those conversations cannot come back into the bigger class, or at least it goes into the smaller group discussions that they have. What I do feel, and I don't know whether it is just me wanting to observe that, but it always feels to me that my students are, you know, even the passive ones, in the small group conversations are more active, you know. So that is a learning taking place. That's not a learning lost there. So even if they hardly ever speak into the big group, the more they have that space, they do. But the writing in itself means that they have to think about what they write. And then they speak to each other about the writing, you know. And in those smaller groups might be less threatening for them in that way. So there are many of the things that, like I said, we use already. But how often, but just to rethink about some of those things that we can talk about. How well does student debates work for you? How often do we do that, is my question. And what might be the challenges that people do experience? Or does it depend on the nature of the content of the work as well, whether you are able to create, for instance, debates? So that's almost like a question that I asked to colleagues.
We had debates up until, so we couldn't do it first and second year, but up until like maybe 4 years ago, we did student presentations and debates within a third year class, and that still worked well. And then the following year, the class literally doubled. And just it was just not possible to do that. But when we had it, it worked really well, and the students were really engaged, and they learned quite a lot because we had sort of reflective exercises and things like that. But we were not able to continue with it. We do it with an honors class now at that level, and then it works also really well. But it's a pity we've had to remove it from the undergraduate component at a third year level.
So some of these things that create it also depends on how big that class is. So for some of it can work and for others not. Now this slide, when I was doing it, I thought this is now not something that is new to any of us, but I thought I just wanted to have the conversation, etc., just in terms of thinking about how we map the curriculum itself, you know. Now we know that our complexity from year to year to year increase. Okay? So that we know. We've got to sort it out, and we're quite fine with that. And for many of us actually as well, the complexity within modules they also do. Right? When I was reading about this complex from the same authors there, and talking about curriculum development, what I really liked about it, okay, and they were specifically, so they talked about Bloom's taxonomy and also big solo, the solo model. Who of us uses a solo model here? You use a solo model. So And you cannot, you know, how do you, for instance, do it? Because the nice thing about the conversation here, and if we look at the pre and the uni and the multi, that's the quantitative content that we need to cover with our students in these spaces, okay? But that we then within the same module and in the same that we are delivering, that we want to have our assessments mapped in a way so that we are able to get to these qualitative components where students can have the relational connection in terms of and being able to think abstractly. But in the same module on the different assessments. I'd like you to share that with us, okay? So it's not just, and that the design thereof is not just in the design of our assessments, but also in the design of our outcomes. So if I look at my outcomes that I put out there for my module, okay? And I start off with where I am. So these are the outcomes. Does the outcomes as they follow actually become more complex, you know? Building on to what they need to. And what I was just picking up in the conversation when I was reading on, you know, in terms of this chapter, was that you can, but I also know it's sometimes difficult, but if I think about what I need to cover with my students and what they need to cover and where I want them to come, you know, how many weeks do I actually need in my design to work on these levels, okay? That then help them to pull together, and then I would see that in my first assessments. Like for instance, and I'm sorry that I'm making a reference to this, but like this one that I do now, you know. But then I'm not sure whether that was the idea. I wanted them to cover, they're going to work with qualitative research, but they also need to understand quantitative research because they need to get the umbrella going. Eh? And then I feel that in the assessment, for instance, that they have now, and in the way of this delivery, as of the delivery of the quantitative almost lied more here, okay? Of that research was then more in terms of the quantitative understanding, getting it there. And then the next assessments then become deeper and having to make connections, etc., and so on. So maybe share with me in terms of how you guys do it, because this is the model that you do, and how do you then use it within the design of your curriculum, in the design of your outcomes, and do you look at how they follow in terms of each other? Do they follow it in that way in terms of assessments that by the end of the day that you can say, we have done the quantitative coverage and engagement and making sure students understand, and then they were able to make the different connections. Okay? Or do we sometimes have the tension that it feels, and I'm just making this assumption, that the need for covering everything means that we get stuck here a little bit too long, you know? And then we don't always, we feel, you know, the students still need to make much better qualitative connections and analysis, etc. and so on. So what's your experience thereof, I think? The question that I'm asking. I'm actually asking you because you said you're using this model, okay?
Hey, Prof, you're opening now something, making me excited, speaking my love language. I've sent you an email, Prof, can you open the email and just send you these two diagrams there. So there's a word that's coming across in all of the solutions, which is design and curriculum, and that's how I do curriculum development, curriculum design, instructional design. So I love this conversation and this topic.
Okay, is this clear enough like that?
Yeah, that's fine. So this was quite early in my teaching career. I'll just start with large class. I come from teaching the education faculty at UJ. Education faculty is the largest faculty in the institution, about 600 students plus. So that was sitting like 400 students, and it's gotten to the stage, like Prof mentioned earlier, that our physical buildings are housing more students than its occupation can apply to your house. Walls are built for 300, you find 400 people in there. So at the center of my teaching philosophy, in some sense, is the course design. And there's two things there. Like, so even with a large class, there's a quote that says, I'm going to just see it, using as many teaching strategies as possible is the best way to reach as many learners as possible. So I challenge teachers and I tell them you use 365 different teaching strategies in a year. Every day a new teaching strategy. And that helps us to understand that each learner learns as unique as their fingerprint. So that requires you as a teacher to somewhere there get out of your comfort zone. Don't be scared of change. And I'm going to come to a more practical level, just trying to give you some epistemological sense of where I'm coming from. And then you can scroll down to it, there's an image under that block.
Which one is that? Is there something underneath it?
There's one under that. So in any teaching, I work with a design. If you work with any practitioner that's struggling with almost anything, you can find flaws in the fundamental design of their learning intervention. It's there, but it's right click. If you right click, yeah, you can see it's just not loading. If you right click and try and load it. Right click lower.
Oh, wait, why is it the link? It says it cannot be displayed. Can you help me out here?
If you go to the
Oh,
top,
wait.
is there a place at the top to say?
You can always come and put yours in here quickly, huh?
No, I'm going to send it again. I just sent the same email again.
Because I can't, it just give me a copy and paste
At the top
option.
of the email, doesn't it say download pictures? If you just scroll up.
Where are you talking? Oh gosh,
Yeah,
no,
it's
no,
on
I'm
there.
exposing my
It's
son.
fine. No, you can see I sent you another email.
Is it?
Yeah, just sent this a new one that came through. Hopefully that
So you say we must have a lot of fun.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, doesn't want to do
Click
it.
right at the top there, I, and his name.
If there's a
And
problem.
there, click right, right. View in browser.
Okay, now
Don't worry, leave it. When that
No,
little thing comes up.
No, I think it might work if you go on the
Oh,
Internet
if you go-
Explorer and say,
yes.
okay. And now the picture might be displayed. Oh.
No, it's okay.
No.
Okay, I've sent Prof the link. You can just click actually on the link.
Okay, so I'm sorry,
Yeah,
you're giving me another something just for the link.
Should come up.
Okay, let's see.
Yes, that new one. Yes, you can just click that link, it will open the picture. So when it comes to Solo's taxonomy or Bloom's or whatever it is, and I think Solo is just one of the many frameworks to inform our thinking, but this is the one that almost encapsulates the entirety of design as an intervention. And this is called Universal Design for Learning Guidelines. And this is very practical, so if you actually, and I'll probably share the link with everybody, but if you actually dig into the details, it's exceptionally practical in how you design and deliver your lessons. And this actually gives you the toolbox for using 365 different strategies when you're teaching different students in a large class or a small class. And yeah, I think we can quite resources.
So are you saying to us we've got the expert on that one? Sounds like
just
it.
a scholar.
The fact is that what we want to do here is that we want to break through our barriers. We want to really break through our own barriers, and we want to share that with each other, and we want to share it with each other as much as possible. So in the context of sharing the slide here, it is to be able to really just look at how, we then put that eye on it. What are the models that we use to be able to relook, in terms of, we're not all going to re-curriculate now at this point in time. Some of us are, and others are not. But we're also going through exercises of asking ourselves questions. Okay, those ones that you guys hate me for, okay? Because of the internal, quality review thing, just a program review, to be able, not quality, but program review, where we ask ourselves certain questions about our programs as well, okay? And it allows us to be able to think around these issues. So it does help, but it does help us too, and as I said, the issue of we need to develop and we need to design and we need to redesign in the way that we are doing things to optimize student interaction, to optimize student learning. The last part of what I want to do, and I'm worried I'm going to run out of time, but I need to give you a body break, would be issues around just the critical writing components. How can we do that in the class? What are the easy ways, the smaller, they said you need to eat the elephant eating in small little pieces. What might be some of those small pieces that we chip away from the elephant to be able to talk about? So I want to look at that as well, because I thought I was just going to touch on some of the strategies here, have a bit of a break, and then we're going to look at the critical writing as other options that we can do as well. But before we take that break that we stand up for now and just run to the bathroom and have a cup of coffee, etc. and so on, is also something that many of us are familiar with, and I would love for us to be able to share that, but it's also the problem-based learning. So my question would be to you, for how many of us in this room here are able and feel that we are actually able and engaging with problem-based learning, okay? That our assignments, and give us some examples of those problem-based learning which are pitched out there as some of those ways to keep students active and have ownership of their learning, right? Because a lot of our assignments, and I'm very guilty of that, maybe it's just me being too old, you know, is often project-based learning, because I design my assignment and then they get all the instructions of what they need to do, you know. But when it comes to, and sometimes we have both of them, okay? But when it comes to problem-based learning, students need to be involved right from the beginning, okay? So they are working in groups. They need to actually, it is set up in ways where they need to define what the issues are. They have to decide what action steps needs to be taken to address the issues that they have identified, and they need to create solutions in terms of that. And what that really does is the fact that it allows for students, because now cognitively they're involved right from the beginning, you know. And I don't think there's even time for plagiarism. I don't know, you know. There might be some opportunity there for AI-generated, I can't guarantee that part of it now. But, so give me some examples of problem-based learning activities that you are using in your curriculum, and maybe ones that you hope that or you're thinking, I want to, but I'm not exactly sure what the sizes that we are having and all the things that we need to cover, you know, the content that we need to cover. So maybe some examples of that.
I'm not involved personally, but my colleagues who work with the fourth years in hospital rotations, students working in groups, they need to choose a patient's case and find the problems, find the solutions presented to the class. They have 4 days to develop their action plan, and that happens under the supervision of one of the coordinators of the hospital rotation. And then their case is discussed in front of the class with feedback from other peers. So the hospital coordinator just guides the process, but is not involved. Just makes sure that they are not choosing the easiest cases, because that's the tendency. And yes, they do plagiarize. They submit sometimes cases that were discussed by previous classes, thinking that nobody will pick that up. But it's a very good way of them learning, because there's a zero criteria there as well.
The problem though with the program is that the students spend so much time on just that they forget that there's anything else to the...
I totally agree, and they are looking at decreasing the number of cases that they need to take in a year.
Because I teach a different subject, they couldn't care less.
Because they are too busy
because
with
they're
this.
too busy doing this. So yes, it engages them, and it's great. But I would love to do the same
in your module.
For my module, which is
as important.
But they are so focused on that.
And your comment is valid. This is why, because they are supposed every second week to get a case. So in a year, they go through lots of cases. It's not only once off. And they are looking at decreasing the number so that they actually can engage in other modules.
So
So yes,
the mark associated.
Yes.
The mark associated.
And how weighted is the mark? It could be weighted on that.
Yeah, so it's a year module. And the final mark, it's made of the hospital rotation, the SOAPs, plus different open books assessments. So everything is open book. You can get access to whatever you want. You just need to be able to identify the underlying problem of the patient, to design the proper therapeutical approach, to engage with the doctors on the wards.
Yes. But what I'm asking is that assignment or problem-based learning approaches is like heavily or disproportionately weighted, like 30% and 8%.
Oh no, it's different modules.
Different modules.
It's different modules.
Different
But how
modules.
many of those assessments, those case assignment assessment that they need to do this thing, do they have in that process?
I think currently they are looking at 8 in a year that starts April and finishes in September. So between April and September, each group submits 8.
Okay.
And then the mark is average of all of them. So it's not only one mark individual. If you've done bad in one, you can still save yourself in the next.
So there is the tension of because it's a lovely way of learning. So obviously now students look at that and focus, but then they tend to want to
Correct.
neglect some other assessments. So one can look at numbers, the amount, as you said, that we are having there, because I think that's part of what you're also, looking at. If you have 8, is do they need to have 8 of those, because it is a very involved assessment that they are having that really help them engage cognitively and take control of it. So everyone can have.
And it's problem solving in more than one way. It's not only patient-centered. We can see the tension between the students. Some are getting involved in this, some others not. They are just piggybacking on others. And then the discussions are coming, but why should he benefit from our mark? Because this was our work. And they need to learn to deal with that as well.
And actually what I'm trying to allude to or get consensus of is the students, you can have a great case study, you can have great problem-solving interventions, but they'll only do it if it's for marks. And even if it's like 3%, they'll even say, it's only 3%, I won't do it. And students are only so focused on how much am I going to get. Yes.
Yeah.
So we have that challenge. How do we? What are the solutions? I note your hand, and then I think I want to have it done without the marks allocated. I mean, it's not just for that assessment, Students don't always want to do small assessments if it's not that. Are we going to have marks for that, So even the small self-assessments that you spoke about earlier, am I going to get marks for this?
I have assessments where I either say you are competent or not yet competent. If you are not yet competent, I always do it again until you become competent.
That's good.
You wanted to?
No, this reminded me of I want to say on a very smaller scale, an assessment that I do that has worked with classes of up to 350 that I've done, where we would have covered certain, this is in community development, certain concepts and the phases of the process, and then I would have a variety of scenarios. Then I would divide the class into smaller groups and give each group a scenario, and then for the 2 periods that we have, so it would be an hour and 10 minutes, they have that time to work in their groups and to come up what went wrong in this scenario, what would you suggest. And most of the time I used to do it in building 1, 2, 3. So there's a lot of space. Then I told the groups, you can go and sit outside for this hour, but not too far away. Then I would move around and visit the groups. And for me, the most valuable has been not what they write down and the marks that they get, but the discussions in the groups. Because they sit with their slides and then they're like, did you understand it this way? No, it's not that. And they actually debate it and they engage with the work, And then by the end of that hour and 10 minutes, they must hand it in. If they're not done, too bad. And it's a minor assessment, but the students have always commented that it's one of their preferred assessments because they learn so much from having to engage with the work in that way.
And you still use it?
Yes.
Is it? Okay. And so it's one of those where they really, like you said, up till a group of 300?
I added 350.
Is it?
Yeah.
Which sounds like, so there are ways of being able to do that. And I think, so there are different examples that we have in terms of dealing with these kind of problem-based, because I was actually glad that you're talking about it, because I was wondering when you mentioned it in terms of the clinical platform and the case scenario, etc., and you do it, I thought, okay, and how does it happen? What would it now look like on another kind of a clinical platform, etc.? And while this is now probably your community development skills theory group, but it is actually having developed it like that and putting the scenario out there and then engaging with it. But I do, and what we are picking up here for ourselves, and I think after this, we can just finish the sentence and let us just get up for a few minutes, okay? And I'm going to just manage the last part of the point now, hopefully. Is the fact that we are already doing quite a number of this, okay? So we are doing it, there's examples of how we do it. So then we ask ourselves, so what was the, how does it come out, what's the value of that, and how do we manage, how do we make sure that we actually sustain that? But also, how do we make sure that there is more of those across the modules that we are having, Some of us are working in curriculums that we've designed a while ago, right? Others are now, we've designed that curriculum, we have thought about it a lot now, and we're getting there. So it's very different in many ways. But the question would then be for me is that when we go have those conversations back in the class, or sorry, in the departments, how do we think about the whole curriculum and all the outcomes that we have, and how do we make sure that we have more of these kind of assessments in ways that we are able to manage? Because these are the kind of things that helps us, bringing us back as well to what we were talking about in our previous slide, in terms of moving from the one level to the more complex within the module and within the assessments, etc. And I mean, so you're going to have another session where you will have 2 hours just for you to take us through that, because I can see that you're learning. Okay? And you're probably thinking, this woman's not talking about this or what? But no, I'm saying it, but I'm also serious about it, okay? Because it helps us to deepen the conversation. The last part of what we do, we're going to come in there. But it does look like we probably, for many of us, we've got a combination, of what we have there sometimes and what we have in the space. And when we are looking at those last set of slides that we talk about, the really deepening of the reading, the writing skill, the writing thinking skill, writing for learning, type of thing, is that then that process then actually starts, it just seems to become something of my words an important part of what that is about. Colleagues, can we have 5-minute break? I'm going to say we have a 5-minute break because I know 5 minutes is going to go to 10 minutes, okay? So I'm not going to say 10 minutes because it's 15 minutes. But I promise you, 3 o'clock we're out of here, okay? Alright, so colleagues, as we are getting to our places again, I think what the conversation talks, as I've shown up already. Okay guys, what are these my... Oh, so
photography purposes.
Oh, okay.
Switched off.
What our conversation has shown us up till now, which I suspected, and I think I've mentioned that there are quite a number of things we're already doing, okay? Or there's already things that strategies talking for, large class strategies that we are busy with. We can see that it generates more activity from students. And if it does, it's about thinking about how do we make sure that, I'm not just talking about the same activity, but activities with a purpose of generating, stimulate student engagement is embedded, and we are able to track students, the deepening of students' learning, through that process, which we can if we look at our assessments, etc. and so on. So it's something in terms of that. I've spoken to these things already, so I'm going to skip it. So we were just talking about, obviously, the issues around using podcasts and YouTube videos. I also like to use my YouTube videos, but the idea is that they can become passive unless there's conversation that goes with it. Okay? And when we do seminar series, sometimes it's also about thinking how can we organize. If we think about how our timetable is set to be, we have 2 hours. Some of you have, so some colleagues, I know in York, for instance, you have the longer, space that the student is. Because most of us are in the 2 lectures and then it's done, and that. But how do we then maybe make arrangements with our colleagues amongst each other that we are able to, within our modules, bring seminar series, where we are. Obviously, we have guest lecturers, but putting that into a seminar series that we built into the process that students are aware of before the time. And for seminar series, they have to do reading before the time, because it is structured in that way. So thinking about how can we move away or move some of the lecture process into designing seminar series within our curriculum might also be one way of thinking about it. And I think that's also where I added in terms of students then having the responsibility to pose questions a few days before the time, so that the presenter of the seminar is able to design it around that. And my observation of that has always been that it generates much more activity, okay? Whether it's a small group of students or whether it's a large group of students. Because it was questions that they wanted to know more about, They know the topic, they've done some reading, they generated questions, so they already come with the expectation. And that makes them less passive in the space. Wanted to add to that?
When we're coming up to a test or something and I say, well, I can do a tutorial session with you guys, we can do something online, go over some things that you don't understand, but I mean, like all of us do, make sure that you send us the questions before so that I know what to focus on, because I'm not going to repeat everything. Invariably, we don't get anything, or quite often.
Yeah.
That they don't come back with, like nobody says that they're happy to come sit there because they don't want to miss anything, but they want to passively sit and just get told what's in the test. I'm getting that so much. What's in the test? Is this section important? So
if we cancel that session, they could go home and say that the next time that we will have a class is when they actually do that activity.
Because that's a structure, it's not just an ad hoc thing that we add in on.
It's not an ad hoc.
It's part of the schedule, and yeah, that's a good idea.
So if they don't do that part, so I tell us because you didn't tell us how we needed to do it. And they might be shocked, I almost want to think that they might think, okay, we can be happy because it's free time now, that we are having. But I'm not sure how happy they're going to be, and just to know that we can also, so that we can't have the lecture because what you needed to do to bring it into, or this conversation, or the session, in that way. So I do think that sometimes we really have to think around that. It will never be perfect, but I've seen at UCT, for instance, there's certain, in my qualification in social work, that they are at the senior third and fourth year level, that they actually have some seminar sessions as well, and that they use a hybrid model to be able to work around that. That out from the beginning, still covering all the work, etc. But colleagues, the comment said she's going to kill me because my time management has been extremely bad today. So what I'm going to do, gosh, you're going to have to give me 5 minutes, what I want to do here is, and I'm not going to go in detail with the sessions that we are having, but the other chapter that we are having that is also based on research within that book, okay, and where the colleagues were talking about it was, now I think a lot of us know this, the writing intensive approach I still had in my beginning, I also went to the university course in terms of it, and I've got a lovely manual sitting there. And it's not always easy, to think about that. And then the CEW, this critical engagement through writing process, has been a South African adapted component of that process, okay, that makes it work for us, etc. and so on. And then what we are just thinking about, because these are the assumptions that's often made that we think, but this will be quite difficult, because now you need to have an amazing vocabulary, okay? But if we think about writing as thinking, that it's not about whether I find the right words, but whether I can allow myself to think in terms of process, okay? And how to then have the opportunities for students to write for an intended audience. Some of the nice examples that goes on in some of the other, the latest slides in terms of it is that, so when students need to write about something, okay, they first write for themselves. Then they write for the person next to them, and they share amongst each other, and they talk to each other about that. Okay? And they get feedback, they give each other feedback. You see, I wasn't involved in that to have to mark and the feedback and the writing is that. And then have to now write after that feedback, okay, for the next audience, whether that's now your examiner, etc., and so on. Processes in terms of that. The assumptions of the authority and power is what we can deal with in terms of the lecturer as the knower. So it helps us also to help students stimulate to look for answers, okay? To promote the multiple nodes of meaning making. So a lot of you, of what we were talking about, we think about our problem-based thinking as well, is that you have a scenario there. What are the different things that you do? What are the different ways that this thing might be addressed? One of the examples there, for instance, that I was looking at is that if you have to develop, okay, if you have to develop a solution, or you have to work out, so dietetics, for instance, there's nobody from dietetics here. You have to develop a diet for somebody with diabetes, okay? And you've got these two different ones. How do you make sense? What does it mean for you, etc., and all of that. But it helps students in this sense to discover course content themselves instead of us standing and delivering course content, etc., and that type of thing. And then the assumptions in terms of complete change, in terms of lecturer approach. Often we have a lot of these elements already in our spaces. We do a number of it, So if I have to think about whether I have to critical engagement through writing, it doesn't mean that I have to go throw away everything that I have. It doesn't mean that I need a 5-week course, okay, for me to design. Often we already have some of that in our classroom, and we just need to be able to identify those and then say to ourselves, how do we work more? So these are some of the assumptions that it's going to require a complete change of us, and it doesn't necessarily mean. And then what are some of the things that we can, and you talk about the opportunities there, okay, if we really want you to think about your critical engagement through writing, is that it can, some of the opportunities, and people were talking about tutoring. And I think the mentoring program, for instance, for all of us are there, okay? That what if we think differently about the structures that we already have and building that component into that, okay? Into that process. What if we think about that? About developing elements of this process and capacitate the people, the students that's already involved in that. How about us doing some of that? Because what this can feel like is that it's too much work for me, And how am I going to put that in? But what if we use some of those structures in terms of that? And I'm thinking, I'm not going to ask that second question there because it's not going to allow us to do that. And then what the next few slides are having, which is 3 more slides, it is just that it gives us some of those conversation, but you'll find it if you read that chapter as well, okay? So issues around writing within the discipline, okay? And I was just making use of the examples of using writing for different audiences, okay? So you write within the disciplines, you have to write about this problem within your discipline for the different, myself, my friend next to me, and then the person that needs to evaluate it, So activities in that way, okay? The other thing, and I know our students don't like, when my students now, because they think about that, to read an academic article, they just go down, and we know it's not easy to do that, But if they know what they need to look for in that, if they know what they need to go look for, and they have to read a piece of work, it doesn't have to be too big or whatever it is, and they must identify what is the argument that has been made there, okay? What is the claims that this piece of work is making, okay? And what are the evidence that's supporting that claim within this? So they purposefully start looking at it, and it's not just a dead piece of work that they need to think of, okay? And examples like looking at different pieces of work and write down. So if we can, activities, so within this kind of writing style is to be able to look at different scenarios, looking at different case scenarios and how that's been resolved, So what has been the main arguments? And in their own words, because now they have to do that within their own words, okay? And share that with the person next to them. These are ways of how students engage with reading and writing, not with the authority of needing to have perfect language with it, and then share with each other, you know, in that space. So it does help us to think about, are there ways that we can use writing for deeper, you know, writing for learning purposes for students, not long before we come to the space that they have to deliver and they have to have all these words, the correct words, etc., that they are having. And then also features of scientific writing. So one of the examples here is to help students distinguish between, and this one was nice for me, you know, when I was looking at it too. So if we say to students, describe this or discuss this, you know, describe, when we have the assessments, we say describe this, but do students always understand the differences between? So this is one of the examples, okay? And it could be any other thing, okay? So then you have a specific topic, you have a specific thing, right? And you say to them, and I'm just using the thing of a waterfall, okay? And the picture is there, and they have to describe the waterfall. But then they have to discuss the waterfall as well, okay? And then they discuss that amongst each other, and we listen and we hear what they are saying, and out of that conversation, we pick up what are the distinct differences between these things, okay? And I think once you have a conversation like that in a class, students will know when they have to discuss, you know? Students will know when they have to critically discuss. We often say critically discuss this, okay? And they don't get to the critical. But if you have examples where they now have to do this, you know, in ways, and then share amongst each other or share there in the class, and then we take it up and we pick it up and see what are those differences. It deepens their understanding, I think, of what that need to be. Okay? The other one, and I think this is something we would be very familiar with, some of the things that you were talking about, example, is to give people, students, a case study. I think we all work with case studies. All of us work with case studies. But you give them ones where there's maybe a badly designed intervention, you know, process or that they need to do. And it could be from any of our disciplines. And then they have to discover the problems, the inherent problems that is part of what is happening here and why this is falling apart, okay? And they need to now design and suggest ways of how we can get better. So they have to work with this stuff, you know, but it's active ways of engaging, etc., and so on. Students can then, you know, students have opportunity to write a set of rules of how a problem needs to be solved, swap it with each other, and implement the thing according to the rules that is being provided to them. Right? And then engage with it. And it's not about whether mine is right or yours. It's about being able to engage that kind of thing. You know, being involved in that. And lastly, is in terms of, and I've given that example now. For instance, I was talking about the diabetics, for instance. So that could be. But the interesting thing in terms of this is that students then, they now have to design this intervention. Okay? And it's difficult if the class is too big, especially if there's lots of things we want to cover, but if a lot of what we need to cover in content is actually embedded in the activity, so they have to learn these kind of things, they have to work collaboratively together, and then they need to present to the class. But we always have those, some students are involved in the class, etc., and others not. But one person needs to present. But they will only decide the day before the presentations who the person will be that present, okay? So if I wasn't involved and I have to present, I'm in trouble. So what does it mean? It might be, and I'm not saying it's going to work, I think we've got lots of, but it means that it just forces students that not being certain, because students also tend to want to go for the person that's strongest in the group to do the presentation. But as a group, they don't decide on that until a day before the time. So they have to work together, okay? In terms of how, you know, looking at this and designing this and building that into. And then just, I thought this one, I just wanted to mention, there were other things about it as well. But also in terms of how our students are going out onto our tracks, our work integrated learning, our clinical platforms, because we all do it, okay? Is also in terms of, because they do portfolios of evidence and all of those. But in that process of what those portfolios is to be able, in their logs that they need to do, you know, because they do daily logs, and our students do daily logs about are they there and do they, what have they done, is to be able to have the question, what did I observe in this space? Okay? And what were my thoughts about what I've observed? And they have to write that as well. Okay? Which means that they have to actively think about what's happening around them, what they see, and how they engage with it. So these are just, and I'm so sorry, colleagues, that I'm running through this now, but I enjoyed the interaction in the beginning, and I just let us be, kind of thing. But I'd like for us to just engage with this a little bit more and bring the ideas of what you already are doing, What I liked about the work here is that I always, like I said, I've had my course, it's lying there in just a thick book like this, and I don't ever feel that I have enough time to bring that into the classroom, But if I have to re-engage with it, and especially re-engage with it in the way that it has been adapted for our context, okay? There are things in here, If I have to take 3 of these examples, not all of them, or just maybe 2, and I incorporate that into my module as I'm doing it now, okay? For more active and deeper learning, because this part here is that how do I make sure there is deeper learning within this big classroom of mine? What are the strategies using this CEW that can help and force deeper learning in the classroom? And I kind of feel if I only have to take 2 or 3 of these 3 maximum, I'm going to enhance deeper learning, possibly. And for me, it feels like it is doable. Right? So it feels like it's doable. What we haven't had time to do, and I've had all these reflections there, is actually the other reflections, but what I want colleagues to think about. And we can share that now, and you can write that up and you can share your ideas afterwards as well, okay? Was the last reflection, what are your views on how we can take this discussion forward and create something like a learning community for ourselves, okay, across our disciplines. I do feel sometimes we have the conversation, we've had the innovative assessment conversation was our start off again, and it was there. We said we need to have another one, but I feel not just having another one is actually going to get us to that point. So what is it that we must do with this kind of roundtable conversation, this one specifically today, okay? That across our disciplines, so I talk here about self-directed roundtable discussions. So what I'm saying doesn't have to be we organize a space and we pull together on a Friday afternoon and we run out of time in the discussion like we do today, okay? But what do we do out of this? Because we connect across our disciplines, right? And we have shared, I saw when you had your stretch, everybody actually first went and spoke to each other, okay? About some things that were shared here. And the feeling that I have is that we have a need to, for the lack of better word, let me just say learn from each other or share amongst each other, in this kind of space. And how can this help us to develop a set of best practice principle activities for me here specifically around large classes within our faculty as well. So I'd like us maybe almost to end off with that process, okay? And like I said, you can think about it, but we can just maybe share it in here. So if we walk out of here, how do we do things? I must tell you, one of the things that I was thinking, or that came up in my mind as I was putting this out there, was I was thinking about Carmen and I in the space that we have there, And 2, 3, 4 people are calling up and saying, so we want to book that boardroom, okay? And because we want to have an afternoon, conversation there that we have. It doesn't mean even that I'm part of that conversation. It doesn't have to be. If I'm part of the conversation, it's because I also want to learn from them. Okay? And out of that, you share with each other. We then go out and we practice these different things that I've learned from somebody else and see how it works within my discipline. We talk around those kind of things, interact, etc. And at the end of the day, these things feed back into what we develop for us as a faculty, as best practice. So that's what I thought was what I had to do.
I have a bit of an idea. I don't know if you're familiar with BNI, the Business Network Initiative or whatever, and so they meet every Friday and it's about networking. But if you're a member of BNI, you have to do X number of one-on-ones with other people in your BNI group. in your chapter, as they call it. And normally they're people from different industries, and the whole point is to try and help them and give them connections, see what they need. You've got to do these one-on-ones. Why don't we try and make something where we say, in a group of either one-on-one or 3 people, we say, especially people who come to these things often, why don't we once a month go for a walk on campus with a colleague from another department, we pick a topic that we're going to chat about, talk about it, and when we come back, reflect on it. Because I think that's a way to start getting that conversation happening, because we talk about it ourselves. But we need the further, it's much better when you get the cross-pollination, and then maybe go for a walk with 3 of us. Take us to lunch break. Campus is lovely, actually. Go for 15, 20-minute walk, go sit under the trees, somewhere different. It allows for a bit more creativity. And put it in the calendar and say, okay, well, let's find a gap where we can both, and then start saying, well, you know, you should actually speak to my colleague so-and-so and see if we can make those connections. Because I think
What is it I about?
BNI, Business Network.
BNI,
yeah. BNI, it's Business Network Initiative or something like that.
Oh, initiative.
But what if you're a member, you have to do X number of one-on-ones with someone else from the chapter per month. And you have to, so they...
Like a health science chapter.
So
Outside learning and teaching
some
chapter.
of those people who are interested
And MMU needs to become part of the BNI,
well, no.
or a department on its own can become part.
Yeah.
But so you would then maybe just set up a page or something and say, these are my areas that I want to discuss with someone. Someone might go, ooh, that sounds interesting. And then they connect with you and say, oh, let's find a gap in our timetable, where can we meet? Let's have a walk and a talk. And if there's someone else who's also interested, maybe make it a group of 3. Or let's meet for a cup of coffee. Out of our offices.
Okay, I really like that. So I'm asking another question. Okay, this is a selfish question, okay, that I'm having here. And colleagues, you can start doing your evaluations as well if you want to, because I know I'm probably out of time. But you guys must like this name, because nobody's walking away yet. But it's 3 o'clock and we're here. Is that, so in that other part I said, so how does this become almost like a community practice, something that we can put together for ourselves. So how about, so I'm thinking about how that sharing happens, because that's a self-directed sharing, etc., and so on coming, and lovely things come out of that. You play, you collate, you test, you give feedback to each other, but we also go into this space where, we've got this one space where we say, hey, we've done this and we had this talk and this is what we came up with, and that becomes part of our not vocabulary, almost like part of our library, for lack of a better, what I'm trying to say, a pool of suggestions and activities that becomes our tested ways of doing across the disciplines. We in the interprofessional collaborative, can you see how automatically that starts playing into that space as well,
The other thing that BNI does is each person each week has to do a 2-minute feedback on or what they've done that week and any connections they've made or whatever. And then you have they do it once a week, a different person gets to do a short presentation on what their business is. Maybe we could do something like that where we meet maybe once a month, each person gets a short opportunity to say what they've learned, and then if someone has something that, a conversation that went really well, they can present it, do 4 slides and do a 5-minute presentation or a 10-minute presentation where they present, we had these conversations and this is what we learned from. And then a little discussion around that.
No, I like that. You know what was so nice about that first training also that we had? We have different trainings. Not trainings, work, a roundtable that we had. Is that we had 3 of the colleagues. We haven't done that now in the invitation, to say people who's got their specific strategies for large class, please, 3 of those people will present in the session here, for instance, okay? But what was nice about that, that's people already, there were people that came up with it. And it would be nice too. So I'm trying to see visually as what you say, and whichever way we think about it, is strategies that is self-directed, but that we can then feed back into ourselves and say, So we will be able to look at and say, this is now where we are. August, we had this conversation, we've had this, we've decided on these kind of interactions. And by the end of the year, we will be able to say, from a large class pedagogy point of view, because that's the focus of this one, these are some of the strategies that colleagues has come up with, okay, that they are doing, that they have discussed amongst each other, that they've even, let's just say, borrowed from each other or tested in different spaces. This is what it looked like, this is the feedback in terms of that. And we, at the end of the day, have something that we can go back to, as a faculty, ways of thinking collectively around these things. That we all feel we battle together and we flourish together. And there's something in that way. We battle together, we flourish together, we share together, we celebrate together. Okay. So any other ideas of how do you think it's something that we need to do? I just kind of feel, personally, my tension here is that I don't want to do these things for the sake of doing it because I have a tick box, so there's some gaps for me and I have to ask people to think around it.
Two suggestions on my side. One is you see the LT teaching development unit, they've got a nice peer review rubric that you can sit in your colleague's classroom and watch them teach. And you get feedback and give feedback and try.
Good luck with your peers that don't want feedback.
But it's good to go to different disciplines and see, oh, wow, you guys do this really differently. And I think that's one. Number two is facilitating communication through a community of practice. And I'm going to say this in here. I'm going to say community of practice, the best community of practices in terms of communication are WhatsApp groups.
WhatsApp groups?
Yes. We belong to too many of them. And there's also this community function on WhatsApp, so it's not like a group, it's like even participants, anonymous, all that stuff. I think information is shared. It's like a good channel.
Give me a word for that, because whether it's the WhatsApp group or whatever it is, you're talking about the online community of people connected.
So if I want to say, guys, I'm teaching a session on this topic, anybody's welcome to come and watch, bring your rubrics also. Open to advice, we have a 10-minute discussion or walk on campus after that and debrief.
Can we not do it on Teams rather?
Yeah, that's good.
Teams is good
Yes,
for community
yes,
practice.
yes, that's great.
Because it does give you can get notifications.
That's awesome. That's excellent.
Okay, can I ask, okay, so now we're going to have these suggestions, but I think what I'm picking up from colleagues is that we need to have ways of engaging with each other more outside of this. Né? The one bad thing about me is that I'm not electronically very good, okay? So if you can come up with those ideas and share it and see it amongst each other, and then we look at it, okay? And we become engaged. I think it helps our connection amongst each other much better. Colleagues, what I want to do, I'm going to end off that conversation here. As you are finishing off your evaluations for us, I do want to use the opportunity just to say thank you very much to everybody for coming out and being here with us. Okay? I know that this Friday afternoon thing, it's easy to go and do something else. Sometimes we just maybe want to leave slightly early or whatever. But thanks for being here. We're not a big group, but it's also like what happens. We can grow from this space in this way that we do it. Okay. So thanks for that, and thanks for your engagement and the responsiveness in terms of when the one workshop looks different from the other, we do it differently. We often get, like just example, the first one we really took from the faculty ourselves. The last one we had somebody to come and speak to us. We had Alticolab facilitating conversations for us. And here you sit today with me and I have to do something that I'm not necessarily an expert on, but it's a conversation that is important. So thank you very much for everybody coming. And in the absence, I want to say thanks to the ICT team and to Matthew and Zuki and Philip in this way that they always support us. And this thing goes onto our website, so it's always captured, the conversation is captured in that way. I do need to say, colleagues, thank you very much to Carmen. Carmen wouldn't want me to say it, but I don't know how Karen still has a relationship with me. Because it's only the two of us, and it becomes extremely busy, and having to function on all these different levels, but always making sure that the day is sorted. And thank you, Carmen, for your inputs and your effort in terms of what we do and making these conversations possible for us. So I want to appreciate your coming, but I also want us really, and you've got the network of people here, okay? And when we talk about this network of people, you know, this community of practice that we develop for ourselves, we're not going to be selfish and say just because we were the only people that came to the session, this is who we're going to be. We get to expand it. We're going to go to our faculty, our departments and say, this is part of the conversation, let's become part of this. We do something great, let's become part of it, okay? So that's what we are then going to do, okay? And I think that's it, all of it, for the afternoon.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Prof. Geert for putting a lot of reading and thought in the presentation, and thank you very much for stimulating the discussion and always getting our tongues wagging. Thanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, colleagues. I was hoping we could spend more time on this, but I think just because it's there, and that's why the information is available to you. Okay? Carmen, you've emailed it to everybody as well. No?
Not the slides, I still do.
Oh, okay. I need to give you the slides. Carmen will share the slides with
But
you.
I've shared the resources.
And it might be that at the next level we then say, because we want to deepen the conversation, okay, on this. So I'm just warning you, it might be that at the next time you come and then you have that curriculum design part, you know, using your issues, you know, so you take follow and you go further with it. You take that. But we will. I think you've said to us a few times you'd like to. You love them to teach this, no? Yes, so I need to put this off. Colleagues, thank you very much. Okay.